Thanks for joining me for another episode of Superwives of the NFL. I'm Stacey Bell-Lynn, and I'm joined by Tondra Gregory. Tondra, how are you? It's so good to see you.
I am doing so great. It is so good to see you, Stacey. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yeah,
This is
of course.
awesome.
I'll tell you about Tondra. Tondra and her husband, Pastor George, you guys serve as the chaplain for the Los Angeles Chargers.
Yes, we have served as the chaplains for the Los Angeles Chargers since 2017.
Wow. Okay. And I mean, I know this because we brought you guys on, Anthony.
Yes.
We met on my break. I was working, and we
Yes.
came, and you guys met us at 30 Rock. And
Yes.
Anthony said, "I think this is going to be our chaplain and his wife."
Yes. So we came with you guys, and we're so thankful for that opportunity to come. We, had uh, done, chaplaincy support of the New York Jets and New York Giants, doing some marital stuff with both of those organizations, and met you and Coach Lynn through that, all of that. And who knew that our lives would intersect down this
Yes.
road at the same, officially serving you and Coach Lynn at the Chargers and still being here.
I know that's the blessing, and that says so much about you guys because everybody respects and loves you. You guys recently wrote, you have a book coming out, and so show me your book and tell us about it because I want to talk about that.
We are very excited about our book. It's called The Marriage Game Plan, and it's about developing a winning strategy for marital success. So we're really excited about this book. It's something that's been on our heart for a very long time, and for this time, we finally kind of sat down and started, putting everything that we've accumulated through our professional experience, through our personal marital journey,
Yeah.
and just the merging of our love for working with professional athletes and working in the NFL. So that's kind of, this book kind of brings everything that represents us in our life together in one resource. So yeah, it's a book that it's a marital book that uses sports analogies to help drive home certain marital concepts and themes.
And you know what? We'll talk about that because I find myself doing that a lot with Anthony when I'm just trying to explain something in life. And I'll be like, well, if this is a game and it were the fourth quarter, because I feel like, and it's not, he's a smart man, but it's like, let's cut to the chase so you can understand this. This is the best way to do it.
Yes, exactly. What George and I were finding is that, women will read marital books. They'll sign the husbands up for, marital conferences and retreats. So we just thought, wouldn't it be great to, bring something for the husbands to kind of really connect with and glean from and resonate with. And it hopefully will, turn light bulbs on in
Yes.
different ways. But it's not, and I know women will be reading the book mostly sharing these
Right.
concepts with their husbands, but so it's not so heavily sports that it's hard to understand for people who aren't, heavily into sports. But
Yeah.
we just felt like it was just a fresh way to start talking about marriage.
Now, I want to talk about, because I've heard so much about this and I've actually seen it, the rates for divorce in the NFL after the guys are no longer playing. So let's just talk about, first of all, what are those numbers compared to like the national divorce rates?
Yeah, yeah. So nationally that divorce rate has kind of been around 50% of just average couples,
Yeah.
divorcing. But in the NFL, we found that 70% of couples divorce after retirement. And so that's why George and I are so passionate about doing this work, because we feel like if we can just take a proactive approach to marriage and helping people lay a solid foundation and get that game plan, then they can build a lifelong love together that would withstand whatever comes against their marriage, because every marriage is going to face challenges and things down the road. But having that solid foundation and having a game plan will help them navigate all the, twists and turns that life brings their way.
Now, I have my beliefs as to why the divorce rate is high, but just give me the top two or three things that you think contribute to it,
Is
or
that, are
that
you
you've
talking?
seen from your experience, because you don't think you have experience
Yeah.
in this.
And are you talking about specifically professional athletes or just marriages
Yes,
in general?
professional athletes. Yeah.
Okay. I do think there's some identity issues that could arise because if you think about your whole identity is wrapped around that sport, and when it's not at the forefront, I do think there's a sense of finding yourself again. And a big part of marriage is knowing who you are and how you fit together. Is one of those areas. And I do feel like because football is king in 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 this world, and it's the primary thing that drives everything surrounds that. So when you don't have that, it's like you couples have not really worked on their marriage throughout this process because it's like Stacy, it's like waves. It's like once
Yes.
it takes off, it's like you're just trying to get your footing. Then you
Right.
have a little breather, but by the time you settle into that, things are
Something else.
rolling again. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, when do you really work on your marriage? When do you really address and have tough conversations? I've had wives say like, "Oh, I try not to stress him out. I try to, stay out of, make sure that he plays or coaches at their optimum level, and I don't want to be the cause of them
Right.
not doing that." So a lot of issues get pushed back and just keep getting pushed back because there's never going to be a good time to
A
bring
good
it up.
time. Yeah. And
So
I want to jump in and say something here about that. I will sit on a lot of things during the season, especially because I don't want to stress Anthony out.
yeah,
But it always leads to at least one major blow up in the off season about something
yeah,
because I've been sitting on my emotions. So
yeah,
I can't imagine doing that. And I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. Maybe you bring it to the table when it's bothering you. I mean,
yeah,
what do you think?
yeah. Well, I'm saying well, that's why you have to bring it up at some point, and I'd rather, my recommendation is letting it seep out in slower, because when you hold on to it, it blows up because you've been holding on to it. And
I
it's kind
can
of like,
attest to that. Yeah.
so when you like shake up that soda bottle and you
Yeah.
take the top off finally, it's gonna splash out and everywhere, and you're not gonna be able to like control it
Right.
or pull it back in. So best to try to you know have the conversation and resolve it as much as you can and let it trickle out, right?
Right.
And I know there's no really great time to bring it up, but because there's no great time even after season, it's
It
like
really
you
is. It's
want
never a good time.
it's never a good time. And believe it or not just in the NFL, I feel that all couples face that as well. It's never a good time. I hear, couples that aren't NFL couples, they're like, but we're in such a good place right now. I
Right.
just want to just enjoy this rhythm right now. And so I just feel like it's something that all couples face. So I just like to normalize it to say, yeah, this is something all couples face, finding the right time. And there are some things that we talk about in our book, giving strategies of how to bring up and when to bring up tough conversations and
So give me
how
an
to
example of one of those. What's a strategy for bringing up a tough conversation and having it?
having the tough one strategy is wanting to make sure that you, I like to say, plan that tough conversation, not like bring it up at some regular or you don't want to blindside each other with a tough
Okay.
conversation. You want to say, hey, this is something that we really need to talk about. When is a good time? Let's both plan on our schedule to talk about this particular issue. And then it's planned, so it's not like impulsive.
Okay.
It's well thought out. And I find that when couples have the plan and know that this is going to be the conversation, then everybody can come ready to be fresh, which I say come to the conversation being fresh, meaning you have slept, you're not hungry, you're not sleepy, you're not
Right. Yeah.
tired, you're not like, you have to choose that best time to help you have a successful conversation about it. And then there's some ways that you bring it up and talk about it where it's not, we want you to be teammates in having these tough conversations. So
Oh, there's that
aligning
sports
your,
analogy again. You got to be
yes, right.
teammates in
You're
having the
being
conversation.
teammates and you are tackling this issue together and not seeing it as we are opponents. And now we've got to like force one person to concede and come to our side. It's like, how can we collaborate and as a team come up with a solution? So that kind of mindset going in as well is very helpful in tackling tough conversations.
The other thing you've mentioned, and I do think this is a part of it, and I've talked with other women about this, is when the identity crisis. But I think that's an issue not only for the guys, but also for some of the women whose identity is wrapped up in, I'm so and so's wife and all of those things. I think it can be an identity crisis for both people.
Yes, absolutely. It can be an identity crisis because there are certain expectations too. I feel like what I've heard from wives and girlfriends is that, oh, when they're playing, it's like, oh, I have these ideas of what our life is going to look like after we're not playing anymore. It's like, so it's kind of like, as soon as this career is over, it's like the wives and girlfriends have planned out what that was going to look like and holding on to those expectations. And the guys, have a different plan. They just never talked about, it's never talked about what the expectation, what's life going to look like down the road. It's because that football, like I said, is king at that time. And I had one wife trying to get, she was a planner and she was trying to get her husband to imagine what life would look like after he's not playing anymore and we're not in the NFL anymore, and her husband was like, if I let my mind go to I'm not playing in the NFL, that's going to mess up my focus. So I cannot think about what is down the road. My focus is what I'm doing right now. I can't start thinking about retirement while I'm still playing, So so I do think it's a big issue if you don't know what it's going to look like, you're not on the same page about what it's going to look like, and you haven't started. But I do understand the guys need to focus when they're playing, but it could be the timing. I'm thinking like not during the season having those conversations, but in between and trickling those conversations. Not like we don't have to have everything planned, but here's what I'm looking forward to and when we retire, and then hearing from what they're looking forward to, because sometimes women have put their careers on hold waiting, like, okay, I'm sacrificing for your career and we're all in for your career, so when you retire we're focusing on my career and
It's
you're
my time to shine.
What'd you say, Stacey?
It's my time to shine.
Yeah. Like now you're gonna give me the same support and you're gonna and to think about it, like for the players at least, not coaches wise per se, but they're still got a lot of life to live. Most of them have a lot of life to live after they retire. So it's like living two different phases of life that you get to live in this world when you are a player and a player's wife. So so a lot of them, there's some resentment when that's not met at the end of the football career, and it's not, they don't feel like they're receiving that same type of support. But then the guys are going through their own thing, which is, I only knew football. I always knew what I was going to be doing, but now I don't know what to do with myself, and I'm still young, so
It's everybody's having an identity crisis. Sometimes, I don't think all of the time. I think another factor, if you are not careful, is that the guys are around so much more. And I think women, at least for me, we start, and for other people I know, you start to operate kind of independently. Then they come home and it's like, oh, there is somebody else who wants to put their spin on how we do certain things. And I think that too can be kind of like,
Absolutely. Are you talking about when they retire or even in off season?
Even like, in January, February, March, and retirement, I would think too, you have to revisit how you do things sometimes and just make sure you are a team.
Yeah. I absolutely have seen that as well, Stacey. It's even like just in the off season, because because the wives and girlfriends have kind of been running things, have their own system, especially if they have kids, it's
Yeah.
like, how do I inject you into this routine when you're gonna only just leave again? So I don't want to get used to you being in the routine. So, but it is, it's almost like you got to have two game plans laid out, proactively laid out. Football dynamics, off-season dynamic, playing professionally or retire. You really have to listen. Game plans have to be adjusted. You know what I'm saying? Even in the game, you may have to adjust things, but that is the same way as life is with marriage, right? You're constantly figuring out, constantly pivoting, changing things, changing dynamics for a successful marriage. And that takes a lot of flexibility and adaptability and just a willingness to shift, you know. And George and I have this thing whenever we talk, we always say, you know, you don't get to have your own way in marriage. We always say, if you want to have it your way, you have to go to Burger King and get your Whopper your way, right? Because that Burger King slogan
Yeah,
is like,
yeah.
have it your way. But in marriage, it is about sacrificing. And I feel like because sacrifice is such a big thing anyway, like for the players, they're sacrificing, their families are sacrificing.
Right.
I feel like they feel like that's the sacrifice, but it's also smaller sacrifices that you're making within that big sacrifice that you're making to be in the league.
But you know, I think that's in marriage in general. People often don't see that sacrifice because the number of times people will say to me, well, you're married and, you know, so like you just have it made. Or, you know, well, I wish I had married an NFL coach or whatever. And it's like, it's sacrifice. I didn't just marry him and everything went my way and I got everything that I wanted. I really did get most of what I wanted, but there is sacrifice along with that. It's not always hearts and flowers. And I just think we live in a society where sometimes, you know, what was that other commercial? People want the easy button.
Yeah.
It's not always the easy
Yeah.
button. Yeah. There is sacrifice. It's compromise.
Absolutely. And I think that's the most misunderstood thing about all of this for people who aren't living this life. On the outside looking in, it seemed as this glamorous thing. You should have no problems. And it's actually harder. You know, certain marriages are like high risk for divorce that we just talked about. And this is one of those industries, you know, that it's really hard. We know everyday couples is hard, but then you add all the pressures that these couples have to do marriage under, when marriage just is hard anyway. But
Right.
the platform, the pressure, the intensity, the can't making it a priority like most marriages have, can do that in a easier way. But I definitely think that's one of the most misjudged and misunderstood parts, is that life is easy because they're looking at this platform and this
The
status
finances.
and this
Yeah.
all the things that should be like everybody's shooting to crave for success in life.
Right.
It appears that it's there, but no one really knows that inside how intense and challenging it is unless you're
And you
in
know,
there.
you talk about the pressures, like the women, we're by ourselves a lot. You have to be okay. You know, I don't like when women say, well, I'm a single parent, because no, really, you're not. But you are doing most of the parenting solo all of the time.
Absolutely.
You know, then you have to worry. A lot of people have to worry about women, you know, trying to push up on their man and how that goes. And
Yes.
there are just a lot of variables. You're moving constantly, and you know, the
Yes.
pressure of that. Like people just don't get those things.
Absolutely, Stacey. Absolutely. People don't get those things. Like I always, listen, I respect the ladies in the NFL so much because they do have to put up with so much. The lives of these women, including yourself, is no cakewalk. And I tell you, I always tell the women that I minister to in the NFL, you have mental toughness. He married you because you have mental toughness, because you can operate independently. You know what I'm saying? Because they can't give you that attention, you have to be able to soothe yourself. You have to be tough and roll with the punches. Like, it's not an easy feat to do, and it takes a certain type of woman to be able to be in this world for all the things that you've said. I mean, I've ministered to women who were pregnant in their 9th month, moving and packing up a whole house, executing a whole cross country move, 9 months pregnant, land, settle in, and have a baby 2 days after moving.
And you don't know anybody who's there.
You
Maybe
don't
your
know
mom can
anybody,
come. Maybe
no
she.
doctors.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's why I say that's mental toughness right there. I mean, I've had ladies pregnant, two toddlers on the side doing the same thing, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like, so I have much, whenever I can shout out women of the NFL, whenever I feel like they're elite in their own right. You know, I feel like they are elite women of the NFL. So I'm so excited that you wanted to highlight their stories with Superwives of the NFL podcast. So I love that, telling their stories.
I agree. I think there's some great stories. Let's talk about the importance of having, chaplains on staff. I would assume everyone has a chaplain. I don't know. Does every team have a chaplain?
Every team has a chaplain, but every team values their chaplain differently.
Yes.
So not every chaplain and that chaplain's wife has as much access or permission to do their ministry the way some chaplains do, or in a full-time role versus how much access they get to be around the players and to be around their spouses. That's what I loved about you and Coach Lynn when you all came. You all just released George and I with such trust, said, go do what you're called to do. I trust you to do that. And George and I have been, pastors and church planners before you all brought us in officially as chaplains, and we were able to create like a little small church within the organization. That's what George and I said. Oh, this is our church. So we're going to minister and pastor people like this is our congregation. And so we were able to go in and work with marriages, and I could work with the wives, and George, worked with the husbands, and we had weekly Bible studies for multiple groups. We had chapel service. We did marriage workshops, so not all organizations allow that. We baptized babies. I mean,
I didn't know that. So you baptized players and coaches' babies? That's wonderful.
Yes, baptized coaches and players, and it was really the best. And my heart would be for every organization to allow this, because this sport dominates their time. They don't get to be a part of a church community, because also the confidentiality of trying to have a safe place for them to receive ministry and to be encouraged and prayed for what they need to be prayed for. Not having that space out in the world because of not feeling safe, or people taking advantage, or just trying to protect the league and trying to protect their spouses and protect themselves from
that's a good point. Just something simple that we take for granted, like being able to go to church. If a player is going to church, oftentimes everybody wants your autograph, everybody wants your picture. Your wife is annoyed because she doesn't want to be bothered. They're probably hitting you up for the building fund 3 or 4 times a year. Like, it's just not, it's really not and I'm sure that's not all the time, but there are probably instances where it's not a safe space. So you guys, or when the team has a chaplain and you are granted the freedom to do what you do, you give them that space.
Yeah, exactly. And I just want everyone, because these are formative years. My heart goes out for coaches. I feel like they're in this world a lot longer than the players. and they have some downtime, but I feel like it's not as much downtime as the guys get to do. So I even feel for that. Like, yes, like having that access for that organization, I think is just really critical for development, for their optimal performance, for their growth. And I feel like it can impact what happens in the game as well if they are feeling good about themselves and feeling encouraged and getting stuff off their chest, or feeling that support could make for a better person, because we know that's what happens in everybody else's life that's not in the league. They get the opportunity to do that.
I know for me, there was a national person who a few years ago, the players will always pray before or after a game. And this person said, I'm so glad that prayer is back in the NFL. And I so badly wanted to respond to her and say, ma'am, where have you been? Prayer has been in the NFL at chapel, at Bible study. These guys have been praying before. And what are you talking about?
Right. Yeah. Well, and a lot of people, I don't, again, it's not highlighted. It doesn't have the weight or the value where it's highlighted. I do feel like it's highlighted a lot more. I'm hearing a lot more, athletes sharing their faith, whenever, they're speaking and things like that. But yeah, I feel like that it has been a hidden part that people are always shocked when George and I tell them what we do. And they're like, the NFL has chaplains? They make sure the guys have pastors and someone they could, that can pray for them? Wow, that's crazy. I never heard of that.
That's amazing. And I do remember Anthony sharing with me that not all teams allow the chaplain to travel with them. And that was very important to him, that Pastor George be able to travel, because you never know what temptations the players are facing, or that may be the only time that they can get one-on-one time with Pastor George. That was very important to him, that he traveled with the team.
Yes, absolutely. And George felt like, because one of the things you have to have is these guys' trust. They're just going to be suspicious. The wives are going to be suspicious. They're going to all be protective. And if you're not building a relationship, most likely if they need something, they're not going to come to you if they don't feel that relationship and trust. And that can only be built with spending time, connecting, showing up for them time and time again. And we've seen that work with players. Like, they'll be looking at George out of the side eye for like the whole first season. Right. And because of him being consistent and not just being about them, but being about their families, their spouses, they eventually start to open up and come to him. So I do think it's not a plug and play thing. It's like, oh, we checked the box, we got somebody to do the chapel services, boom. But if you want truly having transformation and the support that they really need, it's built through relationships and trust being built. So. Yeah.
And you as well, you are a big component of it, because you are so approachable, you are rooted in the word, and so it makes people feel comfortable with you. Like, the wives trusting you is a big part of it as well.
Absolutely. And just being that consistent person that shows up, and we're not trying to gain anything besides doing what we're called to do and using our gifts to help. That's it. And so people can sense that genuineness about you. They can also sense when you're in it for, what you could get out of it. That's why it's a lot of suspicious, and a lot of time has to reflect what your true genuineness and heart is, Yeah.
Now, you and Pastor George have been together for a long time, right? 20 years?
Yeah, 29. Is it 29 years? This year's 29 years. Yeah.
So how did you guys, and you, like you said, you've been a part of planting churches, because once again, we met in New York.
Yes.
And I think, did you guys think you were going to Buffalo when we met? Was that
right? Yeah. So, man, to make a long story short, we were feeling like our time was up in New York City, but we felt like God didn't really reveal what that next step was. And then, so somehow we got reconnected with Coach Lynn after he left New York. And he was doing an interim head coach for the Buffalo Bills. Right. And so he was looking for a chaplain. I just feel like you and Coach Lynn have always just had a vision for what these players and coaches needed, just because of your personal journey with being in a professional sports family. And so I feel like he always kept that at the forefront. So yeah, so we thought, oh, we're going to go with Coach Lynn to be his chaplain, and he's going to be at the Buffalo Bills.
Right.
And then he came to LA to do the Chargers. And so we were just like, okay, God, you know better than us, because Buffalo with all that snow, who would have ever thought we could be in the sunny California with the palm trees? Like, yeah, I think God is blessing here,
Right. And so I was watching our game the other night, and we had we won on a field goal. So it was, it hit the, whatever the thing is called, I don't even know, but it was the doink, and then it goes in, and we won. And I thought, if that is not emblematic of what God does, you think you're going in one direction, you hit a wall, but it's for your good. And in the end, it all works out.
Exactly. And that's why we definitely have to trust God that he has a plan. Even when we're in the valley, God is still working a plan. And that's what trusting him looks like in the wilderness. It's like, I don't know how this is going to come back around, and I don't know how God could ever redeem this, but you eventually see it. Hindsight is 2020. It's like, okay, God, you're good. You did have a plan. Thank you. I can trust you.
Yes, that is so. And even, I would imagine just that is such a simple concept for us as Christians, but I forget it sometimes. And I would imagine when players and coaches are going through the valley, they really forget it.
Exactly. And that's the whole benefit of for me, and I'm not trying to just push chaplaincy or whatever, but it's just what I know, right? But I feel like that's the benefit of having a chaplain who is very engrafted in the team. Because I remember when Coach Lynn had George, like after win or loss, whenever they came into the locker room, George would always lead them before in prayer to God to refocus and get their hearts right, because you got to keep your mind and heart set on God and his plan for your life, and not let it be defined by one moment in time. So just shifting that and I just know a lot of coaches and players always let George know that him leading them to that place right after win or loss was always the right thing. Because even if you win, you need to be, hey, let me get my heart right with the Lord. Even after that, that's God's blessing. Not, So I feel like, for sure, it is hard seeing God in the dark times, and that's what this whole Christian walk is. The challenge of this whole Christian walk is trusting in what you don't see. So I think we're all on our journey of building that faith to trust in what we don't see with our natural eye.
Now, you have talked about you guys planted seed churches, and the church. Tell me about the church that you worked with to do that, because you guys get out and do speaking engagements. You do lots of things. So I want to talk about that as well. But tell me about, the seed churches that you planted, and what's the major church behind that?
Yes. Well, one of the things, like when we moved to New York City with our church, we planted that church. And I don't know if you knew this, Stacey, but I did not want to go to New York.
No, you guys are from like the Carolinas, right?
We're from North Carolina.
Okay.
And I felt like I'm a country girl. And so that's that God would never take me to New York City.
That's fun.
So me just praying and surrendering to the Lord, and that was a process. I'm making it sound like it was so easy. I was not being cute at all. I went begrudgingly. Yep. And the thing about it, going there, planting that church with our church called Kings Park, we went there to plant a church with them from North Carolina, and planting that church and seeing now how every step that we take is like God, it leads us to our next step. Because if I had my way and not moved to New York City, then I feel like we would have never met you and Coach Lynn and ministered to the Jets. Like, we've been working with professional athletes for about 16 years at this point, starting from when we moved to New York City, getting that opportunity to do that and seeing how, wow, like being obedient to the Lord in this moment it led us to our next step, which brings us out here. And so what I wanted to share was we had in New York City, we started our marriage ministry, which is called Journey for Life.
Yes.
And so we started Journey for Life there in New York City. It was just us having a passion to pour into couples. And we just did that regardless of what our main role was. Mm-hmm. It was, yes, we were pastors, but we were trying to reach couples. And so we always kind of pushed for ministering to couples and helping couples lay their foundation. And doing that, just out of the goodness of our heart, feeling like the Lord says, start this marriage ministry. When we moved here to California, God just gave our marriage ministry, kind of took it to the next level. Coming with you and Coach Lynn, with the Chargers, this is where we started speaking at some of the largest churches in America, doing marriage conferences. It was just like it's like what we minored in New York City, God brought to gave a major platform here in California, which led us to, this book that we just wrote was through all of that journey. So my main point is being obedient to God every step of the way, because it is going to lead you into that next thing. So, and so now we get to really full time do the chaplaincy and the marriage ministry that God started building for us in New York. And we never even imagined that both of these things we would major in both of these things when we were just minoring in it when we were in New York City.
That's how God works. Now for you, you've always kind of been, not content to be behind the scenes, but when you guys started doing the speaking engagements, you just really kind of came alive. So, you're so good on camera, you're good on stage and with a microphone. So this is obviously your passion too, and you found your comfort zone with this.
Exactly. And when we were in New York City, I'm also a trained mental health professional counselor. Mm-hmm. So I was comfortable with doing just one-on-one counseling and sitting down with small groups of people. So that was a big challenge for me when God, I had not spoken in front of a lot of people at that point. Okay. And George always shares this joke of when we had our first big speaking engagement. I thought it was a small church in Texas. As a matter of fact, I had never seen a mega church. I had never been in a mega church before. So I thought it was a small church because I had never heard of the church. And a mega church in New York City, Stacey, is like 200 people because you don't have a big building or big...
It's meeting in the gym of a high school.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
So when this church asked us to come and speak at their marriage conference, I was like, oh, sure. I'm thinking it's a small church. That's right. What I've been comfortable with. Get there and they are taking us on stage. First of all, I was blown away how big that church was. It was Gateway Church in South Lake, Texas. Okay. It was huge. It was like a playground, amusement park.
I know.
I was looking at the children's ministry and all the things that they were able to have. And so I was like, oh, this is a beautiful church. And then they started taking us backstage to mic us up. And I was like, I thought we were doing a breakout session. I've never been on a stage this big. George was like, it's okay, you can do it. I was like, George, I'm not going to speak. I don't speak like that. This is just too much. And so I pat him on the back and I was like, you know what? I'll go out there. You do your thing, which is he's the speaker. And I'll just be like, amen. Good point, George. That's right. And because George says I cracked a joke and everybody laughed and then he couldn't shut me up, Stacey.
It was like A Star is Born. Once you got that crowd reaction.
Once they laughed and thought I was funny, George was like, now I can't even shut her up.
He's like, give me the mic.
Yes. And I didn't know that I had that in me at all. I would have never found out I had that in me.
That's, man, I love it because that's, even when we were hanging out and we get together and do our lunches and hang out, I never saw you being a public speaker. Not that you
No.
couldn't, but when I saw the clips, I'm like, Tondra's really good at this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. No, I didn't see myself like that at all. I really felt that George was he was the pastor, he was the speaker. I was just support his
Right.
ministry by counseling or pastoring women, sitting down with women, but like who that's what we've been talking about. God has a plan, and
Right.
there's no way we can know it all, and just taking one step at a time, he'll walk you right into everything. And I say he can't reveal everything all at once because we wouldn't be able to handle it. If he told me and showed me a vision of myself doing that, I probably would have ran in the other direction.
I mean, I've really enjoyed talking to you. I really have. And I want to like come up with some key points to button it up. Okay,
Okay.
so two or three marriage tips for anyone, and maybe this is piggybacking on some of the stuff we said earlier, but
Yeah.
not just for players and coaches in the NFL or in sports, but the keys to a healthy marriage for anyone.
Yes. I feel like the keys to a healthy marriage is one, knowing what marriage is designed to do. Like, because if you don't know what it's supposed to do in you and your spouse, then it's kind of like flying a plane without the manual. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So first understanding, okay, what is it designed to do and what is my role in that? So I feel like understanding that is one will be helpful, because if you know, then you will respond based off what you're supposed to get out of it. You'll be seeking that and doing the actions to get that out of it.
Okay.
And then two, I feel like it's definitely being flexible and sacrificing. I feel like in our culture today, it's do you have it your way, like we've been talking about, but marriage is counter that mindset. It's no, you and me coming together, creating we, right? It's us. I always like to say, yeah, you get married, that's the first step, but then you got to figure out how to be married. How do we fit together? How do we work as a couple to fit together? And to fit together, you have to make some adjustments. You have to be flexible. You can't be rigid. You got to allow your spouse to influence you and you be influenced by them, and not just dig your heels in, but be open-minded to your
Right.
spouse. And then I feel like another key thing is making sure that you are as healthy as you can be. A lot of people feel, and that's knowing like what your triggers are, and not just letting those triggers be the triggers, but trying to understand those triggers enough to work on so they're not triggers. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times when people are triggered, they think, oh, it's the spouse. You trigger me, or when you do that, it triggers me. And they're okay with that being a trigger, but it is about you. Okay, like, oh, that triggered me. Now, why
Why?
is that there? What can I do so that that is not a trigger in our marriage? So I feel like, you can grow and be healed in your marriage with those things that you might have had, like unconscious wounds or hurts or pains in the past that create these triggers for you, fears, anything. But just, creating that safe space where each of you can explore those triggers and be healed and grow from those triggers and not let those triggers control you or your relationship.
Okay.
So I feel like those are like three main things that
Those are good points.
those are main things. They're not the typical things. I always try to
Right.
get things that aren't the typical things. That's why our book, The Marriage Game Plan, is really
Show me the book one
practical.
more time. Let me see the book.
Oh,
The
yes,
Marriage Game
yes.
Plan. Yes.
So
Now, is it out yet, or when is it coming out?
so it's available for pre-order, but it's on the shelves on July 1, 2025. This year it's on the shelves, but please go pre-order it, and then they'll send it to you as soon as they get on the shelves. They'll send
The
you a
Marriage
copy.
Game Plan, George and Tondra Gregory.
Yes.
Okay, I
Yes.
want to get that out there. So you work with, a lot of women doing this, and so you know that the title here of the podcast is Superwives of the NFL. So I always wrap this up by asking people what they have gotten that benefits them from this NFL sisterhood, or what is, something that they like about it. So for you, or from the women that you've seen, what is, or worked with, what is one of the benefits of, this NFL sisterhood?
One of the benefits that I think is the ability to create a community amongst ourselves, a safe space amongst ourselves, because it can be a lonely, isolating place to be. Even though you're surrounded by all of these things, not feeling understood and not being able to be authentically yourself and let your hair down can feel very lonely. And working together to create that community, and I have seen that since we have been working in this world, I've seen women get together and do that, and it's a beautiful thing. And the relationships that get formed when you do that, it goes with you from team to team. Like it goes with you out of the league. I've seen friendships stay intact that were created from these groups that are still like feel that bond with each other. And while you're here, you might as well get some enrichment through your relationships. And it's very hard to do that when you're in the league with outside people, if you don't already have those people before you come in. And then sometimes you can have those people that'll change on you when you're in there.
Exactly.
So for the ladies that are going through this together, it's a great time to bond, because no one understands this world who's not a part of this world. You know what I'm saying? It's hard for anyone to really understand it, and just be with like-minded people where you don't have to try to explain or downplay anything or pretend, is just a beautiful thing that I've been a part of since I've been here.
That is so true. Even when people think they understand it, they really don't. They try, but they don't.
They try.
So,
They
okay,
try.
Tondra, and I want to point out too, you and Pastor George have remained with the Chargers. You're on your third head coach now. So that says a lot, that, people come in and they respect what you do, and they don't, you're still there.
Oh, trust me. Yes. And Stacey, like a new coach comes in, everybody's job is at
He
risk.
wants his own people. Yeah.
So everybody every year is on the chopping block every year. And so for us to still be here with the third, every time we're like, oh, this is going to be the end, especially when you and Coach Lynn left, we were like, Lord, what do you do? Why'd you bring us out here? Like, and then they were like, oh, well, we know Coach Lynn is gone. If you guys want to stay around and continue to do what you do, because the players say you add value to their lives, and we love for you to stay around. And I was like, okay, thank you, Lord, for another opportunity. So
Look at God, as they say.
Look at God. That's all I can say. That's all I can say.
This was so much fun. Thank you for coming on, and I'll be looking for the book, The Marriage Game Plan, Pastor George and Tondra Gregory. So thank you so much, and enjoy the season, and the off season.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Stacey. Thank you for having me on here. I feel bonded to you for life. You're my sister.
Exactly.
And thank you so much. And it's my pleasure to be on here and support you in your new role. And I know your journey as well with all this change. So I'm glad to do this with you.
All right, Tondra. Thanks so much. Superwives of the NFL. Thank you guys for joining us. Talk soon, Tondra. Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye. Thanks.
Bye.